Day Monday. We'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That was the Middlebury Union High School Marching Band. Faith Band. Thank you again for joining us. As tradition, our local scout troop has agreed to join us this morning to read Flanders Field and the Gettysburg Address. May I introduce Sarah Tolchese.
By John McCrae. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, the poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was delivered on November 19, 1863. It is a powerful speech that emphasizes unity, equality, and the importance of democracy. Lincoln's words inspire us to honor the sacrifices made for freedom and to continue the fight for the United Nations. I would like to introduce Declan Gallipo.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so dedicated can long endure. We are met on the great battlefield of that war. We have come to make a portion of that field because those who here gave their lives that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power. To add or detract, the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here. The unfinished work which we fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. They gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Thank you, Declan. We are honored today to have not one, but two guest speakers. May I start by introducing the Honorable Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let me congratulate and thank Laura and the American Legion for putting on this important event. And congratulate Lori on her 10 years at Middlebury College. You know, today is a day where in Vermont and all over the country, people do parades, do picnics, and they go out to ball games. And sometimes I fear that we forget what the day is really about. If you look over there at that monument dedicated to Civil War soldiers, you go around the state of Vermont, in town greens, small towns, you go up to the monuments, you see the people who fought in those wars to end slavery, and the incredible number of people who died in this state and all over the country. Civil War, 600,000 people died. You think about World War I, you think about World War II, Korea, Vietnam, etc. So today is a day, and the young people must understand this, it's a day to commemorate, to remember the incredible sacrifices made by millions of men and women who put their lives on the line to defend this country. And at the end of the day, there is nothing more than one can ask for another fellow human being than that willingness to put one's life on the line for the better good. And I worry a little bit in our country today. We have this individualism where it's all about me and it's all about you and it's all about you. No. What these people showed us is that at the end of the day, what sacrifice is about, as Lincoln said, is to create a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, to create the kind of nation we all know that we can become. And lastly, what I want to say is that as we speak right now, there are wars raging all over the world. Terrible war in Ukraine, hundreds of thousands of people have died as a result of Putin's invasion. Terrible war going on right now in Gaza. And today, on Memorial Day, I hope we dedicate ourselves so that one day in the future, maybe not in our lifetime, but one day in the future, maybe, the governments of the world will get their act together and understand that international conflict can be solved without having to kill so many people. So thank you all very much. Thank you all very much, and congratulations to Middlebury for putting on this great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I would now like to introduce Middlebury College President Lori Patton.
Good morning. You guys hear me? Yes? It is such a privilege to be speaking with you today on the town's greatest and most enduring tradition, that of honoring our fallen soldiers at our annual Memorial Day celebration. I want to specifically recognize and thank the Middlebury American Legion Post 27 for their continual stewardship and organization of this event that brings us all together as a community so that we can remember those who have made that ultimate sacrifice from the Revolutionary War to today so that we may be free, capable of living our own best lives. This morning I want to tell you about one such young man named Edward Shignac. He was a native of Lebanon, New Hampshire, and a scholastic graduate of Kimball Union Academy. Edward enrolled at Middlebury in 1938 as a member of the class of 1942. He was already a world-class skier when he arrived on campus, a fierce competitor in the downhill and slalom, but it was as a ski jumper that he made his greatest mark. He won the U.S. East America ski jumping title and was said to be among consideration to represent the U.S. at the 1940 Winter Olympic Games. However, following Germany's invasion of Poland in September 1939, an operation that led to the initiation of the European theater of World War II, those games were never held. Indeed, the machinations of World War II loomed over Edward and his classmates during this time, and earlier in that year, 1939, the New York Times sports page lauded young Edward's skiing feats in a story headlined, "Shignac's victory in jump helped team beat New Hampshire in the Vermont meet." On the front page of that late city edition were stories cataloging the growing threat around the world, including Roosevelt warns dictators to stay out of the In the spring of 1941, Edward, then a junior at our college, enlisted in the United States Army's Aviation Cadet Program. He clearly loved to fly, whether on skis or elsewhere. He had to push hard for his inclusion because he was originally rejected because he stood just 5'3" tall. But he persisted, ultimately graduating flight training, earning his pilot's wings. And as a commission, he stood as a second lieutenant on December 12, 1941, 5 days after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Edward was sent to the Pacific Theater where he was assigned to a pursuit squadron, and in 42, he took on the fleet of an enemy aircraft, winning the aerial battle while suffering injuries that led to earning a Silver Star. A few months later, while about to engage in another battle, his plane suffered catastrophic engine failure, and a crash resulted in severe injuries which could have and should have ended his war service. But after more than a year of convalescence, Edward convinced the Army to allow him to return to the pilot's seat and back into the sky. This time he entered the European theater, and on D-Day, June 6, 1944, he successfully completed his mission over Normandy, France. The next day, literally the next day after D-Day, he was not as fortunate. While strafing enemy troop convoys, his aircraft was hit by flak. It exploded before he could bail out, and Edward Gignac died instantly. He was 26 years old. I bring you the story of Edward Gignac not because he was singularly heroic, although heroic he was, but because his heroism is a part of legacy of service and sacrifice that has been exhibited by the sons and daughters and all people of Middlebury, the college and the town, since before all of our beginnings. Sacrifices that have continued over the centuries and through the worst of the global conflicts that we see today. No life greater or less than the other, each adding up to a collective whole that has made this town and this county what it is today. We know this because the markers are all around us. This statue dedicated to Middlebury soldiers that has stood sentry for more than 100 years. They are present on a plaque that sits just east of us on Court Square and on a memorial wall in Middlebury's chapel. They are present in the portraits that hang in our town offices and academic halls. But how often do we truly see them? This Memorial Day, I would like to ask us all to see differently. That we walk past this statue on the way to a show and a performance in this beautiful theater behind me with a greater thought of what it represents. That we walk and drive and zip through the roundabout past memorial trees at Christmas and planted flags on holidays such as this one, and give deeper thought to the sacrifices that allow us as free people to be in a hurry. We need to be mindful of these memorials at times, not reserve our attention just for one day, as important as this day is, but to be mindful all days of those people who had just an inkling of a future, just an inkling of a future of hope, and knew that that hope was worth the sacrifice that they made. I want to say one last thing about Edward Gignac. There's a long, narrow hallway in the college's Peterson Athletic Complex that connects the south wing and the older northern counterpart. If you've been in the facility, you know this hallway well, with its expansive windows along one wall that offer views of Pepin Gymnasium, and its eastern wall that features black and white team portraits of Middlebury scholar athletes dating back to the beginning of the 20th century. Among these portraits are photographs of the Middlebury ski team in 1938 and 1939. In each, a young man stands with his teammates. He's nearly a foot shorter than anyone, but he has a giant heart and boundless reserves of courage. He was just 20 and 21 in these images, with his whole life ahead of him, until it no longer was. The next time you find yourself in this hallway, it is my hope that you might discover these photographs and linger over these frames. It can be our way of seeing, of being mindful, and saying thank you, and remembering that the hope in that young man's heart is us. Thank you.
Fun squad, come to the ready. Aim, fire. Aim, fire. Aim, fire. Present group. Order.
And that concludes this Memorial Day ceremonies. Thank you all for coming out. And when you go home and you pop that beer and you roast that hot dog, please just spare a moment to remember all the soldiers that gave the ultimate sacrifice so that we have the freedoms that we do today. Thank you.